and I am checking in a few minutes ahead, listening to the thunder roar outside my office, and hopefully the lightning or the thunder, etc., will hold off so that we don't lose our internet or anything like that. We'll just have to kind of see. Anyway, hopefully you're able to join me because you have power and internet. So anyway, I'm with you today, and let me know if you're here, so that we can begin to recognize you as you join. So we're doing Psalm 46 this evening. Psalm 46. So if you want to take a minute and read that and get prepared, it's a brief 11-verse psalm. You'll recognize several things in there, and it'll be really beneficial for you, I think, if you can. I see Becky Holland is on. Marie Spence is on. Welcome, guys. Glad to have you. Okay, Becky, you're on YouTube. Excellent. We are doing Psalm 46 tonight, Summer in the Psalms. I appreciate Jeff filling in for me last week and returning the favor to do that. So that's always a helpful thing. Taylor's, glad you're here. Hope you're doing great. I don't know about you guys, what side of towns you live on. I know, Marie, you guys live out some, but we have had some good rain earlier. Really good rain. The ditches around the church were full to overflowing, and it was a gully washer, as they say. Daws's, welcome. Hope you're doing well, and it's good to see your names pop up on the screen as well. But anyway, you may have gotten a lot of rain where you're at. I understand from our neighbors that we got quite a bit of rain this past week when we were gone, and so I noticed my yard when I returned was green and in need of mowing. So Josh, my youngest son, will be hitting that up here in the next day or so if we can find a spot to squeeze that in. Zimmerman's, glad you're here. Shirley Watson, welcome. Guthrie's, welcome. Browns, very glad to have you with us. Margaret Anthony, good to see you on board as well. Again, we are, of course, we're in Summer in the Psalms. 30 minutes or so tonight to kind of give us a little shot of some good Bible study, and look forward to your comments. So if you want to read Psalm 46, take a minute to do that as we're allowing a few more folks to onboard with us. That would be great. If you want to find your copy of the scriptures or whatever it is that you are using as far as paper or electronic or whatever, get a pencil and a pen, some note paper. We'll throw out a few things that I think will be worth following up on. Becky Holland says, more thunder than rain at my house. Well, we had equal, maybe more rain even on the north side, not too far from DeJarnett and Osborne. So Mark and Legene, glad you are with us as well. Looks like you guys might be on YouTube as well. Myrtle, Schaefer, welcome aboard. I don't know, can you guys hear the thunder here at the church building? You may be hearing it live at your home. I just wondered if you could hear it on the recording, kind of like we heard Carl and Connor, the fireworks, when they were recording their children's moment thoughts. Anyway, just be curious to hear that. Maybe I'll notice it when we do a watch back later. Kings, glad you're here. We'll get started here in just a second with our Summer in the Psalms. And we'll be doing Psalm 46. And I said earlier, I really appreciate Jeff stepping in and filling in for me last week with Psalm 23. Very disappointed He did not do Psalm 119, but maybe he and I can do that together, or something like that. It'd be kind of fun. So, but anyway, we're going to be doing Psalm 46 tonight, and that will be our topic. So if you want to take a quick second and familiarize yourself with that, you'll probably see several verses that are familiar to you. That's often the case in the Psalms, isn't it? You're like, I knew that. I knew that. I just didn't know where it was, or I forgot that was there, or some phrase from a song that we sing, or other. So anyway, that's often the case. So I think that'll be the case tonight for sure, with a couple of different things, and we'll go from there. Let's give everybody another minute here to jump on board, and then we'll begin with a prayer and jump right in to the text tonight. And while we're waiting for the last minute or so, be thinking about what is your typical reaction to when you are powerless in a situation. And when you feel powerless, what is your reaction? Like, just try to imagine some situations maybe you've been in the past, or someone you know of is, or maybe you're in one now, where you're like, I don't know what to do. And think about that as we begin, and we're going to use this Psalm 46 as a springboard for that. Be thinking about what is your reaction to feeling powerless. And all right, my clock here says 5:02. I want to go ahead. We may have some more jump on board, but let's begin with a prayer. Our Father in heaven, we thank you for today. We thank you for a good morning of worship, a good message by Jeff, good singing, just good fellowship, even though in some ways it's odd just waving across the aisles, but still seeing people, and even if they're behind a mask, still seeing them, hearing their voices is such a blessing and encouragement. And we thank you for the gift of fellowship. Father, we ask that you help us to get to a place where we can come back together safely and in a healthy way, protect those of our community and congregation that might be a little more vulnerable to serious consequences from this coronavirus. And again, I just ask that you bless our leaders as they think through how best to shepherd the flock here. Be with those that have to make decisions, and those that make decisions about how much to get out and to be involved. Just give us wisdom, Lord. Protect us. Pray for the vaccine to be done quickly and safely. And we also pray for Satan not to get a foothold during this time. Just ask that you give us wisdom, patience, and tonight as we study your word, may we learn more about you and how to relate to you and lean on you. And it's in Jesus we pray. Amen. All right, Psalm 46 tonight. Psalm 46. Very familiar psalm. Let's go ahead and read it, and then I will come back and make a few comments about the subscript there that's right under the title, and a couple of other little notes there, and we'll kind of dissect it. I wish there was a way that we could go through it a little bit more in detail. It's just so hard to do with with the technology factor. It just really is, and the delay and lag time with responses just kind of it makes it a little bit difficult to do that. But that being said, let's jump in. Psalm 46. It starts out, God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam and the mountains quake with their surging. There's a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy place where the Most High dwells. God is within her, she will not fall. God will help her at break of day. Nations are in uproar, kingdoms fall. He lifts his voice, the earth melts. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Verse 8, come and see the works of the Lord, the desolations he has brought on the earth. He makes wars cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow, shatters the spear. He burns the shields with fire. Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. So I'm sure there were some things that you recognized in there. Probably first and foremost, Psalm 46:10, be still and to know that I am God. We have a song that is written with those words as the main part of that. It's sung often, and especially within our youth group. I remember singing it in youth ministry years ago a lot. Going back to the beginning of this psalm, to the words underneath the number there, Psalm 46, it says, for the director of music of the sons of Korah, according to Alamoth, a song. So there's some descriptions there. You know, we talked about Psalm 51 2 weeks ago, and it gave a little information about the setting, that it was the Nathan, David, Bathsheba instance where David had been confronted with the sins, and he was expressing, create in me a clean heart, of God. And so that's helpful. We don't have really anything with this particular psalm that tells us what the setting is. However, we do have some interesting just musical notes or authorship notes. And it's interesting. It says, of the sons of Korah, you may recall, this is just somewhat fascinating to me. The sons of Korah wrote several of our psalms. You know, we talk about David and Moses and Solomon, and then the ones that are unattributed to anybody. But then you have this group of the sons of Korah. Who's that? Well, we won't take time, but if you look back in Numbers, or maybe do a search on your own, you'll see that Korah was one of the lines of the Levite priesthood. Actually, Korah had been a nephew of Moses, if I recall. And in Numbers, he had been swallowed up because of his rebellion. But his line did not die. His descendants carried on, at least to some degree, and they remained very much involved in the worship at the tabernacle and in Jerusalem. And so there are many psalms attributed to these guys. There must have been a musical family, right? It must have been their thing. And so here's one. And then it says, according to Alamoth. And what in the world does that mean? You know, we have maskil and other terms that appear with the Psalms. There's a little bit of a clue. 1 Chronicles 15, 19 through 22. And I will take just a second to point this out because it's fascinating to me. You know, you can fast forward if you're watching it later and you are like, I don't want to listen to this. But there's a little bit of a clue about what does that word mean, or what is it in regards to, and we don't still know for sure. But in 1 Chronicles 15, 19 through 22, there are various names here, the musicians that are playing the cymbals. And then there's in verse 20 a list of names, and it says they were to play the lyres, you know, the stringed instrument, the lyres, according to Alamoth. So it's some sort of musical term related to that. And then, of course, it talks about the harps and some other things there. So there was a musical element to this psalm related in this term here, you know, related to the instruments, or related to, you know, some have said that it has to do with female voices, high-pitched female voices. And so I'm not sure. I'm not sure really, but I do find it fascinating that there were musical instructions for the singers. And it says clearly it's a song. It's to be sung. So just keeping that in mind, the words here. There's also another song that's associated with this psalm, a song that we are familiar with, by Martin Luther in the 1500s. Wrote a song in German. It was translated to English for us. I wonder if you could possibly guess what it is. Um, I'll give you a hint. It has to do maybe a little bit with verse 7 and verse 11, which are identical verses, by the way. So you kind of get the idea there's a chorus or when there's a repeated thing like that, okay, it's for emphasis or it's part of the chorus, but the God of Jacob is our fortress. I don't know. What song could that possibly be? Written by Martin Luther. I'm not going to sing it to you. A mighty fortress is our God. A mighty fortress is our God. Okay, Psalm 46, Martin Luther wrote this possibly with this in mind. And there's a little more historical background that could be provided, but in the emphasis of time, we'll move on. So there's several interesting things already. I'm curious, and I did not use this in the reading, but in the right hand, like in the fold of your written paper Bible, it may have said this, or it may have it in other ways. You may have noticed the word there, Selah, S-E-L-A-H, and you may have noticed it 3 times. One around the end of verse 3, one the end of verse 7, one the end of verse 11. Selah. Which is, again, a term that would have meant to pause and to reflect. So, obviously their singing style and so forth would have been much different than our 4-part a cappella harmonies. We've already alluded to the fact that there were probably could have been some instruments involved with this one. There are others, not interested necessarily in going down that road, other than to say the pause and reflect part of this psalm is interesting to me. That it occurs after each little section here. Think about what we just sang. Sometimes we're so busy singing, getting the words right, getting the notes right, making sure nobody hears us because my voice is cracking or I don't sound good or on key. I don't know if I'm an alto, soprano, bass, tenor, baritone, can't hold a tune, whatever it is. And here they're saying reflect, pause and reflect. And so I love that part of this psalm. So let's go back to the psalm itself, and let's talk a little bit about the words and the sections and kind of apply it. I may point out a few other things there, but again, I mentioned earlier, what is your typical reaction to feeling powerless? And the reason I ask that is because there are 3 situations that the psalmist, the sons of Korah, reference here where it would be very easy to feel that way, to feel like things are out of my control, things are way over my head, things are too difficult to deal with, and yet the key verse, I think, is verse 1. That the reminder is God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. And I want to come back to that at the very end, okay, and give you an exercise that I think can be very helpful and encouraging to each of us. But let's look at this first situation where he is talking really about a monumental upheaval of the earth. He says, though the earth give way, verse 2, the mountains are falling into the heart of the sea. The waters are roaring and foaming. The mountains quake. I mean, earthquakes and mountains falling off into the water. And, I'm sorry, my first thought is California. I know earthquake fear there is real. And it's also probably not as daily an occurrence as those of us that don't live there think about. At least from what I've been told by native Californians. But still, it's a very scary feeling to have the earth shaking under you and to realize, there's some incredible natural disasters. We just returned from Florida and went to an area we hadn't been in a couple of years and witnessed the devastation that Hurricane Michael had caused there about a year and a half ago. And I mean, there were forest upon forest where, and I'm talking about inland, a good bit from the coast, that were just flattened. I mean, just flattened. And then the closer you got to the coast, there were boats still up on shore. There were restaurants that were gone that were there a year and a half ago when we were there. A couple of years ago, they certainly were there. There were, lots for sale that it looked like they'd just been, bulldozed. But imagine being in a storm like that. Our neighbors to the north in Nashville experiencing the tornado that we've almost forgotten about earlier in the spring. There's a lot of devastation that nature can cause. And again, the key thing that God's our refuge and strength and ever-present help in trouble. When nature is in such an upheaval, what does it say? Beginning of verse 2, therefore we will not fear. We won't fear. Though the nature around us is out of our control. I mean, I can't control the thunder, the rain, the wind, the sun. It's not possible. We are at the mercy, if you will, of God's protection. Let's look at the next situation, verse 4 through 7. And again, don't forget that it says Salah after that first section I just read. So think about that. God is there with us during natural disasters. So let's look at the next section. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God. Well, what's the city of God? At least earthly city of God. It's Jerusalem. The holy place where the Most High dwells. Well, that would have been the temple or the tabernacle, depending on when this was written. God is within her. She will not fall. God will help her at break of day. Nations are in uproar. Kingdoms fall. He lifts his voice and the earth melts. Again, there's a powerful portrait of God painted there that when Jerusalem is under attack, not to be afraid, because he is what? It says in verse 5, God is within her. Literally, it says God, in the Hebrew, God is in the midst of her. God is with his people. We know Emmanuel, God with us. He's with us now all the time. But to the people, Jerusalem would have been the place where God dwelt among his people, the holy city. And particularly in the temple or tabernacle where the ark was. We've talked a little bit about that before. But it's interesting. God is within her. God will help her. And it says she will not fall. And literally, again, the Hebrew, fall is a fine translated word for this Hebrew word. But it could also mean will not totter, will not tip over, will not shake. So Jerusalem is secure because of God, even if it's under attack. And maybe you feel under attack, That's one way where we feel powerless sometimes. When we're in the midst of a physical storm, but also when we're being attacked. And, it could be that it's just simple things. You're having a bad day. It could be health. It could be personal attack. It could be something at work. It could be something in the home. It could be something, name it, right? But when we feel under attack, we need to understand and be reminded, Salah, pause and reflect, that God is within us. We're not going to tip over. We're not going to totter. We're not going to fall. We're not going to be shaken. Again, nations are in uproar, kingdoms fall, but God lifts his voice, and the whole earth melts. Just, isn't that powerful? Powerful to be protected, again, by the refuge, the strength, the ever-present help in trouble that's our God when we're under attack. Again, the Lord Almighty is with us, the God of Jacob, our fortress. Just a reminder there in verse 7 with, again, the thought to Salah. Pause and reflect on that. He is our refuge. He's protecting us. Third situation. First was the natural disaster. Second was being under attack. Third is kind of a reflection back after an attack. Look at the battlefield, and you'll see the battlefield imagery that's drawn here. The battlefield after attack, verses 8 through 11. Come and see the works of the Lord, the desolations he's brought on the earth. He makes wars to cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow, shatters the spear. He burns the shields with fire. Then this very, very well-known verse. Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. Again, the Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is what? He's our fortress. He's our fortress, our refuge. Salah, the psalm ends. Pause and reflect on this. So it's interesting, a couple of things there. The be still and know that I'm God. The be still that's in the NIV has become kind of the more well-known, more common term translation, and it's certainly good. But there's also, in I believe it's the New American Standard, maybe some others. And I looked at the Hebrew a little bit. I do not know Hebrew. Know just enough Greek to know I don't know much. But in Hebrew, it talks about the literal translation of that might be cease or cease striving, stop striving. And when we think about be still, I mean, is that something that means, be at peace, or be, be still, like be calm? And we sing it in a very contemplative way. Be still and know. It's very, okay. Now what you got to understand is this is an imperative, like exclamation point. Be still. Stop striving. Cease striving. It's almost like you got two boys. Sorry, this is going to sound a little personal because it is. I've got two boys. Kay and I were talking today with Josh, just laughing about when they were younger, about how much bickering and fighting there was in the swimming pool, and how they both just be splashing each other with their heads turned the opposite way. And we just have enough and say, stop it, be still, quit, stop. I almost think there's a sense of that in what God's saying. Cease striving. Let me be God. You be you. I am the God who's the ever-present help in trouble, in the midst of you, who's with you, the fortress, the refuge. Cease striving. I love that translation, and I love the fact that there's a command aspect to it. He's telling us. It's not a request. Cease. Stop. And anyway, maybe he's meaning relax. There's another possible translation. Relax, drop it, let it go, right? And so there's this whole aspect of that verse that kind of changes. Relax, drop it, know that I'm God. Who's God? You? No, he's God. So if we look at this psalm in its entirety, and we think about our typical reactions to when we feel powerless, we're overwhelmed, we're overrun, whether it's a natural disaster, or we're being attacked, or whether we get out and we survey the damage of something and we're just like, what in the world has happened to my life? There's this reminder in Psalm 46 about the God who is our refuge and our help. He's in the midst of us, and there's so many good things. He is with us. He's our fortress. There's so many different things that we can pick out of that. And our typical reaction is, to throw our hands up in the air, to whine, to cry, to give up, to thrash around looking for solutions on our own, to be fearful. To move, to all those things. And there's a lot of good counsel here. In verse 2, we will not fear. In verse 5, we will not be shaken. And then in verse 10, to let it go and cease striving. Let him do the work. And so as we as we think about all those things, reciting and reading and committing the song to memory, committing it to memorization, singing the songs, whether it's A Mighty Fortress Is Our God, whether it's Be Still and Know That I'm God, those are songs that we can commit to our spiritual memory that form us. I want to give you a couple of other things to think about. One is to go through this psalm on your own and to make a list of the things that are descriptions of God. For example, God is what? First verse says he's our refuge. God is our strength. God is an ever-present help in trouble. By the way, I didn't mention this, but the word trouble there very specifically means straits, and not straight as in a straight line, but straits, like dire straits. A strait in geographical terms, I guess with water, is a very narrow passage, right? So think in terms of being cramped or narrow. We might use the phrases, I'm between a rock and a hard place. I'm in a pinch. Things are tight. I'm in a jam. There's some word study that could be done with that word trouble. It's not just trouble. It's when you're really stuck. God is there. And so first suggestion was to go through and come up with a list of things that are descriptive of God. And I think that you'll be blessed by that. The second thing is something maybe a little bit more out of your comfort zone, but I love this first verse, and there's certainly other verses that we could focus on in this psalm and in other psalms. Psalm 23 is loaded with those, but think what a blessing it is to memorize Psalm 23. Think what a blessing it is to commit that to memory and be able to call upon that as you're talking to God in prayer or in song or worship. So here's what I want to suggest. It's a kind of an ancient practice, but one of the things that I find helpful to do is to take a verse like verse 1 and to read it multiple times, each time emphasizing and debating within your mind, meditating, if you will, from Psalm 1 on each word, right? So the first word is God. God is our refuge and strength. So if I was saying that to myself, I would say, God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. And then I might ask myself, is that really my refuge and strength? God, I want you to be. I don't want anybody else to fill that blank in, my own strength, and just kind of chew on that for a minute and then go to the next word. God is our refuge and strength. Not God was. God will be. God was and God will be, but God is present, current. Don't forget that. And then God is our refuge. He's not just mine. He's not mine alone. He's ours collectively. He's going to save all of us. He's our refuge. There's strength in community. God is our refuge. What is a refuge? And you see the pattern there that I'm developing, going through contemplating and meditating on each word. As you commit that to your hearts, to your thought, God is our refuge and our strength, an ever-present help in trouble. And before you know it, that verse will become part of you, become part of your soul, become part of your what you can call on. As Jesus called on Scripture when he was tempted in the wilderness, as he called on Scripture when he was on the cross, as he debated and talked with those that were attacking him, as he shared and uplifted others. We've got to digest and eat the word. We've got to put it into us. So the comments that I made earlier about the types of music and the structure and things like that, those are handles to kind of understand what the psalmist is thinking, what the psalmists, I guess, are thinking and saying. But what's really helpful, in my opinion, is to meditate on it. And the way you meditate on it is just like I described, taking verse 1 and parsing it word by word, saying it over and over again, reading it. And you won't have to read it much before you have it in your head and in your heart. Doing that, emphasizing each word, but not just to yourself, but talking to God, having a conversation. God, are you test my heart and know me. Are you really the person that I'm relying on? God are you still, debate and discuss. I don't mean that questioning necessarily, but give and take is really what I'm trying to say with God. As you use the Psalms to worship, to pray, to sing, to exhort each other, and to be reminded of this thing. I want to read this psalm in closing, and I'm thankful. I haven't really allowed much discussion today. I apologize for that. I kind of got on a roll there. As some would say, he's done gone to preaching now. So I appreciate that. And if you've got a thought, as I'm going to read this one more time, go ahead and shoot those thoughts in there. We're at 5:32. We've got a couple of minutes, and we can definitely share a few things on there as we're wrapping up. But let me read this one more time. If you have comments, throw them out there. Again, I want to remind you a couple of different exercises. Make a list of descriptives of God. God is this from this psalm. And then number 2, maybe take verse 1 or take verse 10 and or pick another verse in there. And those seem to lend themselves more to that, but break them up word by word, meditating on those, praying those, asking God, give and take, talking with him. So let's read this. And again, look forward to just a few comments as we close. God is our refuge and strength and ever-present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear. Though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam and the mountains quake with their surging. There's a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy place where the Most High dwells. God is within her. She will not fall. God will help her at the break of day. Nations are in uproar. Kingdoms fall. He lifts his voice and the earth melts. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Come and see the works of the Lord, the desolations he's brought on the earth. He makes wars cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the shields with fire. Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Salah. All right. What a beautiful psalm the sons of Korah have gifted us, inspired by God. I'm looking to see if there's anything going on here with you on the chat. And again, thank you so much for your participation, at least by staying on there and listening. And thanks for letting me continue to teach that. But such a beautiful thing. And I really encourage you. Let this be some conversation prompt between you and God. Pick verse 1, pick verse 10, the first line there, be still and know that I'm God, whichever it is. And just use that as a conversation starter with you and God. where your heart is, and where your trust is. And I think you'll be blessed. I really do. And that's something you can do as you meditate with anything, really. The Psalms are the perfect writings to do that with. So, um, Mindy Peck says a couple of things here. Thank you for the Psalms in summer. This was perfectly helpful. So glad to hear that. So glad. And Margaret Anthony says, when we are not talking, we can hear. That's exactly right. So when we meditate on a simple verse and we are going back and forth asking God questions and listening, which is much different, I think, than the way we often pray, at least publicly. And understandably, that's a little different setting. But sometimes we give him our laundry list of needs, which he's an ever-present help in trouble. We should do that. But there are some other ways that we can deepen our conversation with God, and which this is one of those. So again, I encourage you as you think about doing that. All right, is there anybody else that has anything they want to say? It looks like you have decided to hold off and share that another time, or you've nodded off already. I hope not. But anyway, what a blessing to be with you guys. I hope you have a great rest of the evening. Hopefully there's some sun in the future, but we're certainly thankful for the rain. We always need that. And again, I'm blessed to be with you for Summer in the Psalms tonight. Join us tomorrow at noon for our daily prayer time. Let's continue to lift up our church, our community, and our country during these times. So God bless you, and hope to see you soon.